Welcome to the Extended Bench, your YouTube home for all things rugby league news, analysis, history and opinion. Subscribe so you don't miss a video and give us a thumbs up. The Extended Bench is part of the Rugby League Monthly Network, which includes a monthly online digital magazine available at rugbyleaguemonthly.com and a daily podcast, Rugby League Daily, which airs during the NRL season. All links are down below in the description. Let's get into it. It's 1939, and French Rugby League is a powerful force in Europe. The national team has just beaten England and Wales to claim the European Championship, and it's the first time any French national side has beaten England on their home soil. Their soccer team hasn't done it, their rugby union team hasn't done it, it's their rugby league team that's done it. And domestically, the game had soared past rugby union in terms of popularity after the national union side was banned from the Five Nations in 1931 due to allegations of professionalism and on-field violence. Yeah, rugby union, on-field violence. Australia and Great Britain had supported French Rugby League. Now that probably sounds weird too, Australian Rugby League supporting the sport outside Australia and New Zealand, but it happened. And in 1939 there were 225 French Rugby League clubs, with three leading rugby union clubs, Narbonne, Carcassonne and Brive, defecting to the 13-man game. The game had only been in France for 5 years, but it was already a runaway success. But as we know, there were bigger issues in France than the growth of rugby league. And in 1940, Germany invaded the country during the Second World War. In southern France, they established the Vichy French government as a puppet administration. And this area is where most of the support for rugby, both codes, came from. It was mostly a working class and rural area. And leading the Vichy government was Philippe Pétain, who saw the league as being too socialist and too closely aligned with the UK and General Charles de Gaulle, who was organising the French resistance from London at the time. French Rugby Union took advantage of this and their close relationship with people in the Vichy government, and with the assistance of that government, they outlawed rugby league. They confiscated all of the grounds, equipment and assets believed to be worth 2 million 1940 French francs, or $543,000 US in today's money, and none of that's ever been returned. It was all handed to rugby union, and union has never paid restitution for essentially robbing rugby league. That wasn't all though. The sport was illegal. You could not play rugby league in France from 1940 to 1945 essentially. Players were banned. You had to either play union, pick another sport, or you gave up sport entirely. And union doesn't like to admit that this is what happened, but in 2002 the French government found that, and I quote, influential officials in the French Rugby Federation endeavoured to eliminate the competitor, which they claimed was a deviant form of rugby union. The effect of the Vichy ban has been felt into the 21st century. Just because the war ended didn't mean rugby league bounced back. Rugby union was in a position of strength and it refused to allow rugby league to recover. From 1949 to 1991, French Rugby League couldn't use the term rugby in its name. Instead, it adopted, and I apologise for my poor French here, jeu à 13, and the game remained banned in schools while being only limited to 200 professional players. And as recently as 2002, anyone in France studying to become a state sport instructor couldn't choose rugby league as an option, while local clubs still had issues sourcing grounds and facilities. Despite all of that though, French Rugby League has endured. In 1951, the national team toured Australia and New Zealand, beating the mighty Kangaroos 2-1 in a 3-match series that was played across Sydney and Brisbane, and in an unofficial 4th match at the MCG, the French won again. In 1955, they repeated that feat. In fact, without even being able to refer to itself as rugby, the French helped establish the Rugby League World Cup. The initial edition was held in France in 1954, with the home side going down to Great Britain in the final. Unfortunately though, much of that was a false dawn. The majority of players from those glorious French sides were those banned during the war years, catching up on lost time. Rugby union had captured the younger generations, and there was no one to replace the heroes of 1951 or 55. And this wasn't helped by the fact that Kangaroos decided not to tour after 1964. The French have since produced the odd upset or close match against Tier 1 nations, but they aren't the force that they once were in the 1950s and 1960s. Still, French Rugby League trundles on. It's nearly doubled its number of participants in the past 20 years, growing from 20,000 to 40,000. And while that's still well behind Rugby Union, which boasts 360,000 local players, it's outstanding to see that the sport's essentially doubled. But rugby league remains popular, and for the first time in history, there are two French sides in the English Super League, with Catalans and Toulouse joining for the 2022 season. And to top that all off, in 2025, the Rugby League World Cup will return to France. The country will host the largest World Cup in rugby league history. They'll be hosting 4 separate competitions: the men's, the women's, the wheelchair, and the under-19s. So get set for 2025 and the massive festival of rugby league where the rooster on top of the Rugby League World Cup trophy will sing again. So vive la France and allez le bleu!